Of January 24th, 2022 of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside. Could I have a roll call, please?
Director Dye.
Here.
Director Lohman.
Here.
Director Clark.
Here.
Director Penrose.
Here.
Director Slater Carter.
Present.
Chair Raddock.
Here.
Good. You have a call.
Welcome, everyone. So I think that the first order of business is to recognize January employee anniversaries. Keishan, would you like to introduce?
Yes, we have amongst us a couple of employees. I'd like to first introduce all the employees who are here. We have Tim Costello. We have Susan Turbe, Carlos Mendez, and George Long, who's signed in as iPad 6. And of course, this is me, Kishan Prativadi, the GM, and we have Jeremy Hungrais, our General Counsel. I hope I haven't missed out anybody. I guess I've covered everyone. Okay, so we have the employee anniversary. That is Carlos Mendez, who's a maintenance mechanic who's completed 9 years. And I'll have Tim say a few words about him. Go ahead, Tim.
Me?
Yes.
Well, there you go. Carlos, what can I say about Carlos? I mean, really, when Carlos started, he came over from the automotive industry, and I know you might not think that it's really a good fit, but really, if you think about the automotive industry, they're fairly meticulous as well, they have to be. And so when it comes to mechanical, working on mechanical, just dealing with things, recognizing problems, it really does transition well. So when Carlos came over, we were all a little apprehensive about it because we've always had people from different industries, but really it's worked out super nice. I mean, Carlos he's just super detail oriented. You know, we can give him a task and he'll get on it and deal with it. He works well with all the other employees. As our other senior mechanics has left, Carlos has filled in the role very nicely. It's just working out, you know, really good. Like I said, everyone enjoys his humor, enjoys having him around. He's really a good part of the Sam family. I'm fearful that someday he's going to end up going somewhere else, but I know, but that's the reality of living in the Bay Area, right? But anyhow, yeah, it's great working with him, and he really is a good employee, and he's a good guy to have around, a good team leader, everything like that.
Congratulations, Carlos. Let's hear it.
Thank you very much. It's actually been a pleasure to be working there at SAM and providing an essential service to the local community. As I take this career very seriously, and knowing that what we do is for the benefit of the health and safety of the general public. Of the coastside there. So again, thank you, Tim, for all the kind words. Thank you, Keishan, and thank you to the board for having me here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to public comment. Speakers are allowed typically 3 minutes to comment. I want us to be careful that members of the public don't engage in back and forth with staff. I think it's okay to ask questions before meetings, follow up after meetings, but public comment is intended just for that. You know, it's comment. So we want to restrict, you know, getting into arguments or back and forth so that we can still, you know, be transparent and let people, you know, access the process, but I'm being mindful of time and others you might want to speak to. So I'm looking for public speakers. I don't see any hands raised. If someone would like to address Sam on matters that are not on the regular agenda, this is the time to do it. And you raise your hand if you're on the phone. It's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. This time I don't see anybody wanting to speak. So I'll close public comment and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would someone like to pull anything or make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yep.
Director Clark,
You're muted.
Director Clark, you're muted.
Excuse me, aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter,
Yes.
Chair Raddock.
Yes.
Consent
Okay,
agenda.
moving on to regular business. Item 4A.
Yep. The first item is the recognition for the CSRMA Workers' Comp Excellence Award. Now, as you all know, CSRMA actually stands for California Sanitation Risk Management Association, and they have a yearly annual Workers' Compensation Excellence Award application requirement. So in this case, SAM went above and beyond the traditional safety to keep their employers safe, to keep their employees safe, and submitted an application. And well, last board meeting, I introduced you to our heroes, and our heroes have done it again. And we got an award from the CSRMA for excellence in the workers' compensation. In fact, CSRMA also sent us a letter later on, and I just read a brief of the letter where they said, it is my pleasure and Sam should be very proud of the accomplishment. They said agencies much larger with a lot more resources often struggle meeting all of the criteria, even when they have more time than you had. So please relay my congratulations to your staff and board. That was a letter I got from CSRMA. So very soon we'll be getting a plaque and a banner, and of course the employees will be getting a cash prize. The cash prize is still not known how much it's going to be, but then your packet already indicates to you what are the different criteria we had to fulfill. So it was a tough thing, and we have also attached the complete application document in the packet. It goes to almost 175 pages. So entire staff stepped up to it. We had to do a lot of things, identify difficult tasks, and then work out standard operating procedures, conduct surveys. A lot of things had to be done. But just wanted to bring it to the board and share this with the board as well as with the public. Any questions?
Very good news. Catherine?
I just wanted to thank Keishan for putting in all of that information. I remember a long past board member who used to complain about staff just standing around and looking down holes and not doing anything and driving around. And I remember the complaints, and this gives the board members and the public a really good way of seeing how much our staff does. And it's sometimes easy to overlook these little things, but these safety awards are important. They keep our insurance rates down, and those can slide up so quickly. And with this, we have documentation to protect us against insurance rates going up willy-nilly. So it's a congratulations and a thank you to the leadership of the management and the leadership and efforts and work of the staff. I'm very impressed, and so you have my deep thanks.
You're here.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Shoot, yay.
Thank you.
Moving on, I hate to move on after such good news, but item B.
Wait, Deborah Penrose has her.
Sorry about that, Deborah. Go ahead.
You mute.
Right.
You're muted.
You're muted, Deborah. There you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Keishan and to anybody else who worked on this application. It was amazing. It's such an extensive application, and so must have taken hours and hours to fill it out. So thank you for doing the work, because even though it's a wonderful award, you had to work to get it, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said. Okay, moving on to item 4B, receive the flow distribution details for calendar year 2021.
Yeah, so this is the flow details which is being provided in the packet every month. We've just compiled it on an annual basis to give you the details, and this will be actually taken into the budget for the 22-23. These are the flow details, and if anybody has any questions, staff is here to answer that.
Does anyone have any questions for staff?
I do. My question is, there are 4 data sets, one for each agency and then one for the plant as a whole. And they all start from the same, essentially 0 point. So when I'm looking at those flow details, is the difference between the relative peak of Half Moon Bay and the relative peak of the plant, is that the combined total for Montera and Granada then? So it goes Montera and then Granada, and we sort of bounce around, and then Half Moon Bay, and then the plant. And between the Half Moon Bay line and the plant line, there's space. Is that space then the flow of Montera and Granada combined?
Sorry, I'm unable to understand your question. If you see the spreadsheet, which is in the attachment, that'll give you clearly the
I'm not a spreadsheet person. I'm more of a graphics person. I'll ask you tomorrow when I come down to sign checks.
Okay. The spreadsheet gives it the same details, and that I plotted it into a graph. So maybe it's
Okay.
confusing.
I'm sure. I just want to make sure that I am seeing this correctly. Thank you.
Did Director Penrose have a question? Her hand is raised.
Deborah, your hand is still raised. Do you want to address this item?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I just took my hand down.
Any other directors have comments? I'm going to ask the public if they have comments as well. Are there members of the public that would like to address this item of the annual flow distribution? I do not see any hands raised. So I'll bring it back. This item is just to accept the report.
Yes, just for information.
So do we need to make a motion to accept it?
That's a
Actually,
question for Jeremy.
yeah.
To receive, I mean, it can't hurt. I mean, it's to receive something, receive and file, so it's probably the better protocol.
Okay, so moved.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Slater-Carter,
Yes.
Chair Raddock.
Yes. Thank you.
Motion passed.
Item 4C, which is adopt ordinance 22-01 for the non-domestic wastewater source control program, is drafted and direct staff and council to publish the ordinance as required by law.
Thank you very much. We had a public comment from one of the residents on this particular item, which came in by email. I had sent it out to all the to the board. Did you want me to read the public comment, or how do you want to go about, Chair?
I read the item. It's fairly long.
Okay.
Just by sending it in, it's accepted as part of the administrative record. If someone would like to just briefly summarize the points, that would be, helpful.
Jeremy, would you like to go ahead and summarize it?
Yeah, I mean, it just, I think it comes down to her point was she's not in favor of the ordinance as drafted. Her view is, I believe, interpreting correctly, is that SAM should implement its existing authorities. In the past, perhaps it hasn't done so as much as it should, and the member agency should perhaps assert greater oversight of SAM in this program. Something along those lines.
Okay, it'll be up on the SAM website tomorrow, so the public can take a complete look at it. Now, the NDWSCP, that's the Non-Domestic Wastewater Source Control Program ordinance, was first adopted in 1991 and then subsequently revised in 1994. And then the latest, it was revised in June 2019. In the previous meetings last year, the board decided that the NDWSCP implementation should be shared to a greater extent with the member agencies with SAM oversight. And therefore, guidelines were drafted by Half Moon Bay, and that was brought to the board. And the board wanted staff and council to go ahead and convert it into an ordinance, thereby modifying the existing 19-01 ordinance. Several discussions have been held with the member agencies as well as with the respective councils, and it was brought to the board earlier, and corrections, comments have been incorporated, and it's been finally being brought to the board today for adoption. So if there are any questions, staff and general counsel are here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Keishan, and thank you, Jeremy. Are there any director's questions at this time? I have one question I'm sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
I don't actually have a question, but I have several comments. I intend to vote no on this because our council, our district council, and our general manager, as well as I believe MWSD's council and general manager, agree that this this ordinance would alter the JPA without the explicit approval of all three of the major member agencies. And that's not allowed by the JPA. It will just make everything much messier because it contains language about the member agencies issuing or co-signing the non-domestic permits with co-signing with SAM, which will really make a messy situation in terms of who's responsible for what and who answers for what if problems arise. Is it SAM? Is it one agency, member agency? Is it all the agencies? It just, it doesn't seem that workable. It also opens the door for interminable arguments over who's going to pay any fines that could ever result from non-compliance with the state and federal regulations. And this is my opinion, but I think it's likely that the regional board, the state, and the feds, when they learn about this, might very well say it's simply illegal because SAM has the authority to issue these permits. There's nothing about member agencies being able to do this or co-sign non-domestic permits. So I just don't think it's a good idea. I don't know why we need a new ordinance, because this program has been in place since the early 90s. And it's been amendments and ordinances have been passed several times before now. And this will just make everything a lot more complicated. I think what we need are clear demarcations and direction of what the member agencies will do and what SAM will do. And we can work in collaboration. I think it's clear that we can do this, and we need to. For our district, we would like to be the interface between our ratepayers and constituents and non-domestic dischargers, in that we will contact them, we will get their information, we will make the initial evaluation of, there are some commercial permits, but do places like, real estate offices or hairdressers or whatever, do they need non-domestic permits? And we would like to do that evaluation and present it to SAM. And then for the ones that clearly will need non-domestic permits, like the breweries and the fish processors and a few others, I think it's clear they will need those permits. And so we would take the lead in getting the information that's required for the permitting that SAM already has a detailed outline on. And we can make sure those people understand what they need to present and what they need to do in order to maintain these permits. And we acknowledge that SAM has the final determination. So SAM doesn't have to spend time with their staff doing all that I've just described, but they will have to evaluate what is presented to them. And again, we recognize that SAM has the final authority on this, because that's the way the JPA is written and how the regulations are set up. And so SAM would then issue the permit or ask for more information or deny the permit if they thought that was appropriate. And then if that was the case and the member agencies didn't agree, then it would be back on the member agency to do more work on it and get SAM to either agree or to back off and say, all right, Sam's right, these people haven't done enough to get a permit. So those are the reasons I don't think we need this ordinance, and I'm not for it. Thanks.
Director Penrose.
Yes, I would like to hear Jeremy's response to that.
Jeremy, you're muted.
My response will be much more effective when not on mute, for sure. Yeah, so some of this is a surprise. Met with the member agency managers last Friday, and it seemed like everyone was on board. So a bit of a surprise to hear some of Director Clark's comments, although I certainly respect his opinion. As of right now, the general manager of SAM, under the existing status quo 2019-01, which by the way is significantly different than the 1994 and 1991 versions. There wasn't a whole lot of attention paid. It was Beverly Marshall's last, I believe it was her last board meeting. And on the way out the door, pretty significant rewrite of the non-domestic program. Now, it gave the general manager of SAM significant discretion, but still needs funding to implement the program. And so that's an issue. But as it stands right now, so if the board were to vote no on the proposed ordinance, you do have an existing ordinance which could be implemented. I agree with that. But it doesn't do, Director Clark, what you say it does. It basically gives most of the responsibility, if not all of it, to SAM. So the proposed ordinance that we crafted based on the prior guidance given by the board about a shared relationship, it would create and authorize more of a opportunity for the member agencies to do exactly what you just described, which doesn't currently exist. First of all, the 22-01, it would not alter the JPA. In fact, the reason for, and it was adding the co-signing responsibility that was added at the suggestion of Montera's counsel, which seemed at the time like a reasonable compromise. They wanted to ensure that it was SAM doing the issuance of the permits, because the JPA agreement stated that that permits needed to be issued by SAM for industrial permits. Unfortunately, 2019-1 never defined what industrial meant. The 1994 regulation did. In 2019, they removed the definition of industrial. So got a disconnect with the JPA agreement. But in any event, so we added that language to clarify that, and Montera had a concern that that there had to be, because SAM was the POTW, there had to be the ability for SAM to control what went into its wastewater system, which is true for all POT. That's the purpose of a non-domestic program, is to ensure that whatever's going in is not going to ultimately cause interference or pass through, which is what's in the EPA regulations. As far as who pays fines, I mean that's I think that's always a live issue. I'm not sure that adopting this is going to change that one way or another. I think that's a question that's always going to be a live issue as to who's responsible. Right now, payment of fines and liability is attached to which member agency, if it can be allocated, is responsible for the event that gives rise to liability. I don't think this changes that one way or another, because ultimately it's SAM who would be responsible for ensuring that permits issued, and also the question of whether a permit is issued or not. SAM would retain under 22-01 that responsibility. But I got to tell you, that's their responsibility under 19-01 as well. So that doesn't really change. And I'll be clear, I'm fine with 19-01, but you got to fund it, because otherwise you're not going to have, and that's a decision for the board, but I think that's what the regulators are going to expect to see. As far as it being illegal to have shared, that's a new one. I've been talking to the lawyers. I haven't talked to Granada's counsel, although I've reached out to him a few times. I would have loved to have heard this before now. I did talk to Montera's legal counsel a couple times, as well as the city's counsel. But it's not illegal to have shared responsibility. In fact, that's quite common. If you, just an example, SACWA, which operates 4 different wastewater treatment plants, and they have a pre-treatment program. They have a structure where minor non-domestic dischargers are permitted directly by the member agencies, whereas the larger dischargers are permitted directly by the POTW. And it's just a sharing arrangement, and all overall oversight is with the POTW, but because it's just, it's a manpower issue and how they want to most efficiently utilize their resources. So it's not illegal. It's what we have here that's kind of unique and nice, and we don't want to lose, is we don't want to wind up in the EPA's, it's actually implemented in California by the State Water Board, but the EPA regulations specify what a pretreatment program has to have. It is way more rigid than what we have. And so if you're not going to go with the framework in 2022.01, which I thought was a compromise approach, but if we're not going to go with that, we really need to implement 2019.01, because if you don't, then you potentially wind up with something that you're not going to like very much, which is going to be the formal program derived from the EPA regulation. So that's my response, and happy to answer any questions.
I think Rick Lohman was next. Rick?
Yeah, well, first of all, we entirely support Matthew's comments. The reason we do is that all the member agencies expressed the interest and concern that they want to be the #1 contact. This gives them that. All Sam is doing is looking at it and approving it. That seems to be what everybody wanted. So that's what my comment is.
Catherine?
Sam is going to need funding in any event. And I suggest when we make a motion on this that we also include addition to it that says that we endorse 2019-01 and want to make sure it is fully funded so that it can be used to work together with the member agencies to get this as a fully functioning program. Jeremy, you're right. Montera came up with the dual signatures because we couldn't see leaving Sam out of the process. But I believe this should be, Sam has the statutory obligation to be in charge of this, and I think we should work on getting 2019-01 functional and funded, and work as member agencies to get that done before we rewrite something we never did. In looking into this, and in the letter that we received tonight from Delia Comito, who is a customer for GCSD, she points out that this was going until about 2005, and I've talked to other people, and indeed this whole problem seems to be part of the, and you've heard me say it before, the revolving door of general managers. Things got dropped off. Things got left out. And this is one of the basic functions of SAM, and we need to be able to fund it and do it well. So I agree with Granada. I think changing the ordinance, if we change the ordinance, nothing is going to change if we don't fund it and if we don't play well together. So I agree with Granada.
So what you're saying is, after all the work of the member agencies, you're not going to accept the draft that was the compromise that I assume everybody had approved?
We had, Montera had our reservations, and they were very strong reservations. And so we would like to see 2019-01 put into practice before we start changing things around. One of the things we need to work on is the definition of what non-domestic waste is, because that got pulled out of 2019-01. Jeremy did put a phrase in a section in the new one on 2022-01 for that, and we should put that in 2019-01.
Just to clarify there, if I could, the definition of industrial was removed. The definition of non-domestic was in 2019-1, but industrial, because it's an automatic trigger for non-domestic treatment. There's just some that's the one clarification, that because the JPA agreement is tied to industrial users, that's the reason why it's so important. But that's a relatively minor change. If we want to go and just stick with 2019-01, just everyone should understand that it gives even greater discretion to the general manager of SAM. That's not to say that that he can't work collaboratively with the member agency managers to establish protocols for determining who and who doesn't need permits. That can and should happen, and that can happen under 219-01, but it doesn't create a formal permitting system. It doesn't create a formal system that the member agencies can take advantage if they want to. One more point, and that is that the member agencies don't have to take advantage of the permitting system under this current version. It's an option, but they don't have to. It's enabling, not restricting.
To clarify, you're talking about the 2019 one when you say that.
Oh, 2019, there is no option for the member agencies to do permitting under 2019-01.
That seems problematic. Keishan, you have your hand raised, then I'll go to Deborah.
Yes, thank you very much. I fully respect Director Clark's concerns and comments, but my concern is a little bit different. We committed to the Regional Water Quality Control Board when we got the letter in December saying that we will complete the permitting and complete the effluent characterization for each member agency. I contacted the member agency managers and we gave a commitment in writing to the Regional Water Board that Montara Water Sanitary District will complete it by end January and Half Moon Bay and GCSD will complete it by February 15th. So I'm a little concerned that we have to not only issue the permits, we have to also do the effluent characterization. And as you all know, the effluent characterization takes a minimum of 10 days because the BOD results take 10 days. So it is imperative that we should have started it, if not, at least started immediately. That is my concern, and we are answerable to Regional Water Quality Control Board. The language in the ordinance can, we can work around that and keep changing it, but at least the agreement, the directions which was given by the board earlier, I think I would just like to remind the member agencies that please pass it on to the respective managers or the persons concerned, saying that they need to complete the permitting as well as the effluent characterization by February 15th, especially GCST and Half Moon Bay. Thank you.
So just a clarifying question then, Keishan. The set of circumstances you described, does that have a bearing on tonight's decision? And if so, how?
That's a difficult question to answer because I do not have an update of what all the member agencies have done till now. They are expected to reach out to their consultant and get things started. And I'm not sure if by adopting this or by not adopting this, whether Sam will have to start from fresh, or I'm ignorant about that. Because the previous guidelines mentioned that member agencies will reach out to the consultant and finally give it to Sam to oversee it. It hasn't come to Sam yet for us to oversee anything which is yet to get started.
Jeremy, do you have a comment about that?
I don't know what the regional board's going to do. I just think we need to be able to say to the regional board, we have a program, we're implementing it. What flavor that program is, I'm not sure they care. Whether it's this ordinance that is proposed for acceptance tonight, or it's the prior version, I just think they want us to have a non-domestic control program that we're implementing. And so to the extent that we're still kind of wrangling with what we're going to do, I don't know how they'll interpret that. But if we're saying coming out of tonight that we're going to implement our program, whether it's the new one or the existing one as of 2019, maybe they'll be satisfied with that.
Director Penrose.
Yes, I move that we adopt the ordinance, the non-domestic control program ordinance as revised, and establish a funding mechanism for it. Period.
Is there a second to that motion? I'll second it for the purposes of discussion. But I will hear from, okay, we're going around again. People are getting their second shot at comments, starting with Matthew and then Kathy.
Okay, 3 points. I think the big problem is the idea of co-signing. We can, as far as I know, the member agencies and SAM can share responsibility, but I don't believe that it's, the flexibility includes co-issuing permits. That is SAM's authority, and member agencies do not have that authority. And I don't think we can have an ordinance that makes it sound, look, and be that it's equal responsibility, because that's just simply not how it's set up legally. Second, my second point is, as I said initially, I didn't get the idea that the regional or state or the feds may, if we went with this co-signing idea, might very well say, hey, you can't do that. It's not legal. That was my conclusion. It was not our counsel. I just have been thinking about this for a long time. And so that was my conclusion. Maybe we'd get away with it. It'd be a real mess if we didn't. And third, our district is moving forward right now. Staff is working every day on getting records from SAM about which of our connections, our sewer dischargers, were formally had already qualified as needing a non-domestic permit, and that so that we don't have to start at ground zero. And we are also exploring getting information from the county on who, what new companies have been permitted and are operating in our district, so that we can then let them know what's going on, and that they're, unless they are clearly a domestic only, they're going to have to go through the process of being evaluated for whether or not they need a non-domestic permit. And if they do, then they have to get it ultimately from SAM. Thank you.
So Matthew, what would cause you to let go of your opposition to the ordinance that's included with the packet? Are there specific things you would want changed, or just the whole thing you don't like?
Well, again, I don't see where it's necessary. We do have previous ordinances. The foundation was put together back in the 1990s. We've had this program for decades. I don't know why we have to have a whole new ordinance to change anything. And again, I will say this real sticking point for me is the idea of co-signing. It just muddles the waters so much. Who's responsible for what? If there are mistakes made, or the state or the regional decides to come down on us for some reason, co-signing just spreads the potential for being really hassled by the regulators the higher up they get. And I just think it's a really messy, bad idea.
So Jeremy, could you clarify at least as to the legality of co-signing?
Yeah, I mean, it was like I said, I thought it was a kind of an elegant solution floated by Montero's counsel, and it was an effort to get around the concern about the desire. So there was a tension between the desire of some agencies to be able to do permitting, and the desire of other agencies to have SAM do the permitting, and concern about inconsistency with the language in the JPA agreement if Sam wasn't the one doing the permitting. And so the idea was a compromise approach that would have Sam in charge overall of the permitting approach. So under the cosign approach, Sam would be issuing the permit on Sam letterhead. So let me rephrase. The member agencies, if they took on the responsibility, could issue permits. But within 30 days of issuance of that permit, Sam would either have to co-sign it or do nothing. Like if they do nothing, Sam did nothing, it would automatically go into effect. Right, so that was the idea, was it would automatically, it would allow Sam the ability, if they were unhappy with the permit, to do something about it. But it would also allow some permits that maybe were non-controversial or that already been adequate coordination to go through. And so the approach was it was a compromise. And now whether it's inconsistent with the JPA agreement, I don't think it is. Right? Like I said, it's pretty common for there to be joint relationships and delegation between the JPA, but between the POTW, who has responsibility for the pre-treatment program, and those who discharge the POTWs. That's not unusual at all. What makes our situation a little different is that we have specific obligations imposed contractually through the JPA agreement, where it says that SAM will issue non-domestic permits. So the cosign obligation was an effort to accommodate those member agencies who wanted to be able to do the permitting themselves, which I thought there was at least 2 who did. I thought Granada did. At least that was the prior representation. And so it was an effort to try to, meet everyone at least part of the way to accomplish what they wanted. But if that's not what you want, if you don't want to have, if you just want SAM issuing the permits and a requirement for coordination beforehand between the general manager and the member agencies or agency staff, that's okay too. And in some ways that's simpler. But that's why we have the compromise language now that we do right now.
But to Matthew's point, he was thinking that it was illegal. But your opinion is that it's a legal option.
I believe it is legal. I have no compunction about it being illegal.
So you just said a member agency could issue the permit. We're not allowed to do that. The member agency could issue the permit, and then if Sam didn't like it, they could do nothing for 30 days. The permit would be good. De facto, the member agency has just issued the permit, which they're not allowed to do.
They're doing it as agent for SAM. It's overall SAM under SAM's cognizance. SAM is supervising and administering the permitting program. They have the ability to deny the permit. That's the key. Do they have the ability to deny the permit? Yes.
Yeah, they have to. They have the authority to give the permit.
Right. It's on SAM letterhead. It's a SAM permit.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Catherine, but Barbara has not had her turn yet, too. So
Barbara, do you want to go before me or after me?
I don't care.
Okay. I have a couple points. One, let's keep this thing simple and not open to dispute or lawsuits. A little sensitive to that. As far as Keishan's comments, whether we pass this or not, if the agencies haven't started the work that they were supposed to do, it doesn't sound like it's going to get done in time anyway, and it just goes to show a failure on the part of those agencies that haven't done it. And so I see that as not particularly relevant, because passing this tonight or not passing this is not going to speed or slow down that work. Why is Half Moon Bay so resolute to have this passed?
You're muted.
Can't hear
You're
you.
muted.
Debbie.
My impression from talking to our staff is that this has been a group document, that this involved all the member agencies. I am not.
Montera apologizes for making the compromise to try to meet. It was wrong. We did a wrong thing, and Matthew has explained that. Done.
And Debbie, it was not necessarily a joint effort or a joint agreement. We were trying to find solutions, but other concerns have come up in the meantime. I would like to
By the
see.
way, I just want to add that Half Bay has been doing all the work that you're talking about. We started it, several weeks ago. They're already.
And that's great. Good for you.
Good. So I would like to see this vote divided into two parts. I'd like to see funding the non-domestic waste portion for SAM as an up or down vote. And then I'd like to see changing the ordinance as an up or down vote. I do not think they should be tied together.
Point of order. The motion has been made and seconded.
Let's vote.
Point of order, Ms. Penrose. I'm making a request. You guys can do it. You guys, let me finish. Let me finish. You can do it as you like, but I think the statement needs to be that we as a group want to fund SAM, and we can have our differences of opinion on the ordinance.
That might be your point of view. My point of view is very different. I made a motion and there was a second.
Yes, and we will get to that motion. I'd like to hear from Barbara.
I'm really confused. Well, that's not the right word. I'm really frustrated by this whole process. Our goal from the beginning at Granada, as I understood it, and certainly the way I felt it, was that we wanted to be the interface with the businesses in our district to avoid potentially some of the more punitive actions that were out there in looking at testing results without considering flow levels and things like that. We had some concerns about that. I think some legitimate concerns. And we were willing to start a program that would, again, already we talked to consultants about starting a program where we would do the initial work. We would interface with the businesses. We would keep track. I know our staff has been working very hard to try to get information from SAM about previous permits in our area and so forth. Who signed the permit has never been a huge issue for me. The issue was, how do we work with the businesses in our community to help with this process and make sure that the process is, not that it wouldn't be, but make sure that because we're the local people, that we make sure that the process is not only fair, but is perceived to be fair. I feel as if these various versions, legal revisions of this document, which I have read many of them, I try to do my job as a board member to read all of these. We got another version Friday night at like 5 o'clock. I had a busy weekend. We got revisions again today. Tonight, it seems like what we're being asked to do is choose between this latest version, which we just got today, or going back to the original version, which as at this point, but my understanding is it essentially gives all the power and authority to SAM. If SAM is willing to delegate some of the implementation of the program, and if it can under the previous ordinance, I mean, at this point, I am not willing, I may abstain, I may vote no. I'm not willing to vote yes on this because it seems very complicated, and I have respect for Matthew's concerns about the double signing and so forth. But honestly, at this point, I'm not sure where I am on all this. All I know is I want a reasonable interface with the businesses in our district, and then I want us to be able to say to the regional board, we did a good job, we did our job. And we at GCSD are willing to do our part, And I am really not able to say which provisions of which ordinances are going to make this happen. I'm not at that point. So that's where I am tonight. Sorry. Can't be more authoritative.
Clemens.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Reddock. First of all, I wanted to thank my colleagues, particularly Maz, who gave this path that is considered tonight a good start, and also Jeremy, who really did most of the heavy lifting and thinking this through. Montera's position was from the beginning on that the JPA states that SAM needs to issue the permit. We also thought that there was a solution in place that is workable. And what I understand is that there is an extensive operations manual in place at the Sewer Authority Midcoastside. I believe it was in the board packet at least once. And I encourage you to think along the lines of using this operations manual to get to what the member agencies really want. We've heard very clearly that Granada, as well as Half Moon Bay, want to be part of the process and want to be the interface. But on the other hand, we also hear now Matthew's concerns, which reflect really what we've been trying to relay a little bit from the beginning. So maybe there is a path. Actually, that is what we've been thinking from the beginning on, that there is a path working with the existing ordinance in place to achieve what the member agencies actually want. I also think that the funding is not necessarily a big discussion, because both ways SAM needs to be involved and needs some funding. I actually think that there could be really a bit of efficiency if SAM takes a bit more, as in the ordinance is described, but the member agencies act as the interface. So I don't think we've ever objected against these reasonable requests from the city as well as from Granada. And I think that is achievable with the existing ordinance that's in place as well. Yes, that's my comment. Thank you.
John Dowdy. You're muted, John.
I'm trying. Sorry. I'm trying to get the video on. There we go. I'm trying. Sorry. I'm trying to get the video on. So this feels like one of those evenings where no good deed goes unpunished. But I clearly, from the city's perspective, and is that we've worked very hard, and I think I appreciate Clemens' comments and acknowledgement. I think of the managers working together, and Keishan and Jeremy, I think, has done an excellent job as well. I did not necessarily think that this last round of revision was entirely necessary. I think we had an ordinance in place, but from my perspective, we still believe it's important to be the first point of contact with our customers, with our businesses, and we are willing to try the co-signing option simply to see whether that will work. If you don't try it, you will never know whether it works. My concern is that we saw kind of what happened when we lost a bit of control at the local agency, and having SAM, and it's not a criticism, work with those different business owners and everything. And I think it was very difficult for SAM because That's really not what they do, and it's not their constituency. And it also left us in an awkward position of not having a contact and connectivity with the business community as well. So I guess I leave, and my recommendation would be for all parties to agree to try this. We can call it, a trial. We can call it whatever you want to call it. We were anticipating coming back with a whole package of revisions to each of our local ordinances, again, to try to bring all of those pieces together, with the idea that this ordinance would also come back in all likelihood with revisions to reflect those changes and address it. Obviously, the JPA, we can't override JPA with ordinance. We know that. But if we don't try something and we don't try this and work with this, then we're back to where we've always been. And I don't think from the city's perspective, that is where we really want to be. We want to manage our FOG program. We want to manage this. We want to be able to talk to them, but we trust in our partnership with the SAM staff and believe that we can work with this. And again, if it doesn't work, we can revert back to the original process and hand it back to SAM staff to do it all. But nothing is lost by trying this. Certainly, I'm disappointed and at the point where we are tonight from working with managers, but I understand. I've heard the arguments and understand that concerns about the loss of control with the joint signature. But again, if it doesn't work, we can go back to the original point. Nothing in the ordinance precludes us from handing it back to the SAM staff and letting them do it all. So we've lost nothing by adopting the ordinance tonight. We provide some flexibility. There we go. Sorry, I know I can see some shaking heads, but that's where the city and that's where, from my perspective and the staff, and where I believe the managers had gone with this.
Thank you, John. Jeremy?
All I have.
Yeah, thank you. So first in my, to Director Dye's comment, everyone's busy. So unfortunately we didn't get to have our meeting with the managers until Friday afternoon. So it was just, we tried over a couple of weeks and it just didn't work out. So I got to spend Friday night, implementing changes while having COVID, which wasn't, which I still have, but I'm getting better. But that's never any fun, never any intent to jam anybody, but we just, the folks couldn't meet. And then the second round of changes was just, I just did an additional proofread. I wanted to make sure that what you voted on didn't have any, I just wanted to make sure it was good. So I caught a couple inconsistencies where, there needed to be member agency or the authority or member agency, just to make sure there was internal consistency, but there were no substantive changes at all. It was all just, non-substantive, just making sure it was internally consistent. So, but that shouldn't, if you have concerns about what you're doing, that's a different question than what I just brought up. So let me go back a little bit because I want to address, how do we get kind of the point where we had all the changes to the ordinance? I know John just said maybe he thought it wasn't necessary. Back in November, the board stated that there was a whole kind of guidelines the board gave. And one of the guidelines was they wanted the member agencies to be able to do permitting. And so in order to do that, it's true. It was part of the guidelines approved by the board, right? So it was an option for member agencies to be able to do permitting. So in order to accomplish that, we had to change the ordinance to allow it to happen. So that's what that process has been. One of the issues out there is the city has an existing FOG program, which they've been implementing, but for now, and maybe we should address this and make the FOG program something entirely separate. For now, the FOG program is part of the non-domestic program. So that's something that we want to make sure we don't do anything that prevents the city from implementing their existing successful program. So trying to balance all that, again, I don't see any inconsistency with the JPA agreement. The way the JPA agreement reads talks about industrial permits have to be issued by SAM. But what does industrial mean? It's not addressed in the JPA agreement. And so we've taken what I believe to be a reasonable approach. But if the board isn't comfortable with it, if folks really have questions about it, we have an existing program with 2019-01 that can be implemented, but there has to be the will of the board to allow SAM staff to do so in cooperation with the member agencies. And as to the issue of the member agencies being interfaced with the public, I think that can happen under either approach. It's just a question of SAM staff working together collaboratively with the member agency staff to make that happen.
Thank
Call
you,
for the
Chair.
vote.
Yeah, could we have Deborah, do you have any opinion as to whether you want to amend your motion at this point, or is it fully realized?
I have nothing to add.
Okay, so roll call on Deborah's motion.
Did you want to restate the motion again for clarity? Jeremy?
Deborah, you're
Was it staff recommendation, or what was the motion?
No, it was not the staff recommendation.
Deborah, you're muted.
It was per staff recommendation with the idea that we will create a funding program to support it.
And I made the second on that. So could we have a roll call, please?
Director Dye?
Abstain.
Director Lohman?
No.
Director Clark? Director Clark, you're muted.
No.
Director Penrose?
Yes.
Director Slater-Carter?
No, and I'm sorry that this was set up to not fund the SAM non-domestic waste program, and that is for the minutes.
Chair Raddock?
Yes. Jeremy, do you want to weigh in on what that amounts to there with the abstention?
Well, to prevail, don't you have to, I mean, my understanding is you have to have the vote of one other agency in addition on all votes. That's my understanding.
So are you saying the motion prevails?
I would say the motion fails. It's you have to have.
Barb.
The motion has been taken. It has prevailed. I guess
Thanks,
we're moving
Barbara.
on.
The motion didn't get 5 votes.
Right, you have to get 5 and 2. All right, I'm going to pull out the JPA agreement.
What does an abstention mean, I guess?
Yeah, my understanding is the motion fails. Because you have to have an addition, you have to have 5 votes. Director, I'm sorry. Chair Roach, do you feel differently?
No, I don't have an opinion. I am assuming that you're the parliamentarian here.
Yeah.
Well, this is a different, we do the votes different here at SAM than anywhere else I've ever been. Hang on just a moment. Okay.
I might be able to assist here.
No,
and
I've got it. Unless otherwise provided by law or elsewhere herein, a quorum of directors may, by 5 affirmative votes, adopt any motion or take any other action they deem appropriate to carry forward the objectives of the authority. Passage of any resolutions will require 6 affirmative votes. It requires 5.
Sorry?
It requires 5.
Okay. I would recommend going forward that that directors not abstain. If you weren't at a meeting and something comes back in the minutes, I understand that. But your responsibility as directors require you to take a position, up or down. But you should take a position.
Thank you, President Chair Ruddick, but I think that it is an allowed for members to vote, and I respect Barbara for that.
It is discouraged in the Council of Cities. It's discouraged. It's discouraged in parliamentary procedure. Now, in the state legislature, what they do instead is they just get up and they walk out. But really, it's, you shouldn't be able to, abstain and avoid accountability, basically. But so we have a failed motion, and I will entertain an alternative motion at this point. Barbara?
Speak to say, I understand that my vote was going to make it fail, so I am being accountable. I think I abstained because I am frustrated because I paid a lot of attention to this. It's an important issue, and I just have trouble finding a way to support something that produces the result that I, for one, have been asking for what, 4 or 5 months now. And so it was in effect a no vote, but it was a no vote expressing my feeling of frustration that here we are with a much more complicated document, which we got at the last minute and which, as far as I can tell, doesn't accomplish the goal that we've been asking for. So you want to see it as a no? I knew it was more or less a no vote. So I don't think I was I was avoiding accountability. I think I was expressing my frustration. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to say here, I haven't had, really a chance much to weigh in, but I will say this, that I am just sort of disappointed in the level of commentary and interactions on our board of directors. There persists on the part of Montera, specifically, Renata goes back and forth, treating this as a personal item, rather than as part of your fiduciary responsibility, both as representatives of your agencies and as directors on SAM. It's Montera, especially Rick Lohman, makes everything so bitter and so personal, as if our responsibility, the way we take our responsibility and our fiduciary responsibility for our ratepayers and our system is somehow an aberration, that only your 2 districts have responsibility to your ratepayers and the people that you serve, and that somehow Halfman Bay's the villain because we want to, for our agency and the people we serve, exactly the same that you want for yours. There's this perpetual thing that Rick Lohman does, is trying to demonize the opposition, to try to demonize anybody that disagrees with you. And it just creates this terribly sort of bitter aftertaste in the mouth if you're watching these meetings and participating in these meetings. And it's wholly unnecessary. This is the problem with the JPA, and I'll tell you, for those who think we ought to be a separate special district, I agree with them 1,000%, if only because of the posture that the directors on this board engage in repeatedly, meeting after meeting after meeting. I'm not going to leave here tonight without approving a solution, because I think we have to do that as part of our responsibility, given the oversight of the regional board. and the possibility of litigation. But I'm not going to do it because I'm bullied by you. I will not be bullied by you. In the future, I will not allow bullying language and personal invectives interfere with these meetings. And it's going to end tonight. And I'm going to do what I did the last time I was chair. And as you recall, I shut it down when it happened, and I will shut it down again. So I'm happy to entertain another motion. But by God, moving forward, if I hear that tone of voice and that posture from you again, I'm going to break down the meeting. Make your motion.
I totally reject all of those comments by the chair. My comments were, this gives the member agencies total control over the process. All that's required is that we follow the JPA and have this. There was nothing vindictive in that. Nothing. I'm sorry. I understand your personal bias against this and my reactions, but I never said any of that stuff. Any of that stuff.
You say it meeting after meeting, Rick. You convey it in your tone of voice.
I don't
Excuse
agree
me,
with that.
let's shut this meeting down, please, because I hear what you, Chair Ruddick, you are engaging in what you said you didn't want.
Director Slater Carter, we need to take care of business tonight, and that means passing some sort of program.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a motion.
And make it.
We have a program. It is in 2019-1. I make the motion that we fund it.
Thank you.
Is that a second, Rick?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just a clarification from the attorney. So as to that motion, is that a complete motion?
I think if the motion is, so we have an existing 2019-1 is already the existing policy, existing ordinance of SAM. If we were to fund it at a certain level, that would need to come back under a Brown, and we would need to, but if it's the intent, if it's part of the motion, if it's the intent of SAM, of the intent of the board to fund the non-domestic program at adequate levels, that would be an appropriate thing to say as part of just reaffirming 2019-1.
That
we're going to approve
motion.
a certain amount, that should come back and be approved separately noticed under the Brown Act.
That is my motion.
Director Slater Carter has taken on the legal counsel's advice. Rick, do you second again?
Yes.
Okay, roll call, please.
Wait, I have a comment. Can I please make a comment? Which is, if the agencies are going to do the work of doing all the interfacing, who are we funding for what? If Sam is only going to, we're already paying something to Sam for this. It may not be as sufficient, but how much funding are we authorizing? What are we doing here? I mean, if I think that the city, I think the legal counsel has answered that question sufficiently to inform the motion.
Right. I mean, the answer is the amount you're going to fund in addition to what you're already funding would need to be a separately agendized item to approve that. But if it's the will of, I mean, you have an existing ordinance, you want to follow your existing ordinance. And so if it's just to simply provide adequate funding for the existing program, I think you can say that now. That doesn't require an additional agenda item.
Okay, roll call, please.
Director Dye?
No.
Director Lohman?
I don't understand the motion. I'm sorry. There's funding things going back and forth. Are we funding it tonight, or are we funding a specific amount? As Jeremy said, is the intent just to fund the program? Then I vote yes.
It's just to adequately fund the program.
Okay, yes.
Director Clark?
Who decides what's adequate?
I think that funding is a given. Yes.
Director Penrose?
I think until we determine what we mean by funding, I'm going to vote no.
Director Slater Carter?
Yes.
Chair Radek,
Yes.
can I speak?
What's the vote for?
Yeah,
Can I make a suggestion, Chair?
I'd like to hear from the attorney what that vote ends up being.
Well, let's see. We had, let's go over who we had here. We had one from the city. So we have 2 yes, 2 no from the city.
No, I was a yes.
Yes.
It was
Right.
5-3.
So 5-3 in favor. That's my understanding. So
Yes.
it passes.
Keishan?
Yeah. So may I suggest that in today's meeting, if we can move forward with the funding as per the general manager's authorization to start off with. And later on, if we want more money, then we come back to the board at a later stage and ask for funding. So that way, at least the program can move forward with the GM's authorization, which is $30,000. The program can get started. We can at least proceed with it and get sanctioned for more amounts at the next meeting.
That's consistent with the board's, with the motion that's just passed. That's consistent with that.
Correct. I'm just putting clarity to that.
So are we voting, were we voting on $30,000 to fund this program? No.
No,
Oh, sorry. Okay. Then I'll keep.
Yeah. Any specific amounts for additional funding would need to come back to the board.
fine.
Yeah, but at the same time, this motion authorizes the general manager to move forward with the 19-01.
Yep.
And you have existing authority to spend up to $30,000, so you don't need additional authority approval to do so.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to move on. General manager's report, item 5.
You have the detail in the packet. If there are any questions, staff is here to answer. Anybody, any questions, please?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I was looking at, I always do, the the flow charts for the plant and in the rain and so forth. And I'm curious, is it possible to get an analysis of how much each agency's flow increases in the rain, the percentage of increase?
Do you want me to answer that, Kishan?
Go ahead, Jim.
What I could do is I can take average dry weather month and split out the flows that way. I could take, say, December as an example, then an average dry weather month, midsummer, sometime in that time frame, just so you can see the relative difference if that's what you're looking for. And I could trend them separately, so I could have one trend wet weather month over a dry weather month. But you want to see it like that? I really need to know how exactly you want to see it, because it takes a lot of time and effort to put these things together. So I really need to know exactly.
Director Dye, could you work offline with staff on that matter? If there's additional information you want.
I think it would be valuable. It would be interesting.
Why don't you work with staff on that?
I will do that. Thank you.
Director Clark had a question.
I think this might be better just to bring up in future agenda items, but I'm wondering about the maintenance plan. We have in the last 5 budgets a statement that one of the things that Sam will do is, quote, develop and implement maintenance plan for routine maintenance on all equipment. And I'm wondering what the status of that is. But I don't expect well, this is kind of off the wall. So I don't expect that I'll get any kind of complete answer about it now. So I think it's probably better. I will make the suggestion that we have a new agenda item to address this.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Item 6, attorney's report.
It's already late into the meeting, so nothing additional report this evening.
Any director's reports?
Is this where I talk about future agenda?
No, that's item 8.
Item 8, I will wait.
That's okay. We don't have any other directors raising their hands, so go ahead.
Okay, for a future agenda item, we were about midway through legal counsel's contract. And I would like to have the board do a review for his reference as to how we think he's doing as a performance review. So it would be closed session.
Yeah,
And
is that
hopefully with
something, is that
Christopher's help.
something the operations committee might take a look at first? Chair
That makes sense, and I'd like to work with Christopher on that. If you
Chair
don't mind.
Would you agendize that for one of your subcommittee meetings?
Yes, we
Director
can.
Conway?
Yes, we can. We do have our first meeting on the 1st of February.
Great. We'll agendize that.
Okay, we're going to convene in closed session. Thanks everyone who's been participating. We'll see you next time.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Thank you.